Professor Worgley's here. We just got done going over the slides. We're going to come back to Canvas on lecture number 13. Let's download the before class content and make sure you put it in your 2830 directory. We have a new lecture. We're on lecture number 13, which is going to be our Building Apps 1. So I'm going to put the code in here. You can also put your slides there. You're going to unzip that, and we're going to open it up in brackets. So I'm opening brackets. We haven't opened brackets for one lecture, so let's come back to brackets, and I'm going to open up the Building Apps 1 lecture. So I'm in number 1, position.html. I'm going to launch the live preview. You'll see I put some styles here, so everything on the page has margin 0. The divs are 500 by 100. I have different colors for different divs. You'll see one div has a margin bottom of 500 pixels. That way I could see scrolling content here. And you'll see a div down below. So we're going to do all the different positioned elements. And I want to be able to scroll so you can see fixed. And here I have a nested div with an ancestor. And then I have my classed fixed. Now, we're going to take a look at this code, which is going to help us with the entire application. Coming back up to the styles, we're going to look at div number 1. Now, div number 1 has a background color of forest green. So if I scroll back up, div number 1 is right here. If I zoom out, you'll see that this is actually the normal flow. So if I don't define anything, it's going to have a position of static. So I'm going to type position static here just so you can see it doesn't change. Remember, elements with position equal to static are not positioned in any specific way. It's positioned according to the normal flow of the page. And this is actually going to be the default position for each element. So if I comment or uncomment, you'll see no changes take effect. Now let's look at div number 2. Let's try a different position element. So let's say I do on the red div, I do a position of relative. As soon as I type position relative, nothing's happening because I need to apply left and right. And remember, left and right has no effect on a static position. So let's say here I do left 20 pixels, save it, refresh the page, it doesn't have any effect. Even if I put position static here, refresh the page, nothing takes effect. So static positions have no effect with left and right. And if I put a position other than static, you won't see anything until I do left and right. So let's say I do left 100 pixels, and from the top of its normal flow, I'm going to do 10 pixels. So you see it move down 10 pixels from its normal flow, not from the top of the page. Now, you'll see at this point in time, the yellow element is behind the red element. Once I use a position element, I can now use the z-index property. Remember, the z-index property specifies the stack order of an element. So if I do z-index, and let's say I want it to go below the yellow one, so I can use a lower z-index, so I can put it at -1. Now you'll see the yellow is in front of the red. Whereas if I take this off, you'll see the red is in front of the yellow. Okay, so I put it back on, yellow's in front of the red, red's in front of the yellow. Okay, so that's going to be the stack order of an element. You can think of a stack of plates. The red was on top, and now I put the stack order lower than the default. The default will be 0. So now I did -1, so the red goes below the yellow. So let's write a comment to make sure we know what z-index is, because it's definitely going to be on an exam. Here's my note. The z-index property specifies the stack order of an element, and here is the important part to remember. An element with greater stack order is always in front of an element with lower stack order. In this case, the red element, we specified a lower stack order, so it's going to be behind because this yellow element has a greater stack order. The default will be 0. The other thing I want you to know for an exam, which we saw before for the Polaroid images, is z-index only works for positioned elements. If I do this z-index and I take off the position relative, you'll see z-index doesn't matter in this case because it's going to be the normal flow and nothing will be on top of each other in the normal flow. So it makes sense that z-index can only work on positioned elements, because once I do a positioned element, two elements may overlap, and then z-index will be applied. However, that's going to be on the exam. I'm going to give you, let's say, some code, and I'll say which element will be on top. Well, if the element is not positioned, then neither will be on top, because z-index only works on positioned elements. We're going to take a look at the next positioned element, which is going to be absolute. Stick with Professor Wergeles and continue to the next video.